Manchester City, a club with a rich history of failure and success. A club that's looked upon as one of the richest and most successful clubs in recent times. But that was not always the case. They were a struggling club at one point. In fact, they were in a huge trouble. But this season kind of saved them. Let's take a look at the season that saved Manchester City. Consider subscribing to our channel. It's free and helps us a ton. Thanks. Manchester City of today is one of the richest clubs with huge reserves of cash at their disposal. This wasn't their reality a quarter of a century ago. Now, ups and downs are part of a club's history, especially if the club has existed for over a century. But at one point, Manchester City was in danger of being lost down the lower rungs of the English football pyramid. How, you ask? Well, around the 90s, City were in a real pickle. We made a video on Manchester City's dark days, their yo-yo status after the relative success and stability of the 60s and the 70s. But for a brief recap, the 80s were not kind to Manchester City, where they were constantly yo-yoing between the first and second division. But by the early 90s, they had achieved relative stability and were part of the Premier League at its inception. But the stability of the early 90s gave way to the utter chaos of the mid-90s. Once Peter Swales, the long-serving but pretty much disliked by all the fans chairman, departed and Francis Lee took over the club administration. The team was in turmoil, and by the end of the 1997-98 season, Manchester City had been relegated twice in 3 seasons to drop all the way down to the Football League second division, the then third tier of the English football pyramid. This was the first time in Manchester City's over a century-long history that they had dropped to the third tier. But that was not all. Manchester City's on-field issues were only part of their troubles. Manchester City were also in serious financial trouble. Joe Royle, City's manager at the time, says, quote, "There is no escaping it. That was a low in City's history. God only knows what would have happened had City stayed down there. They were in dire straits financially. There is no guarantee the club would have survived. The club was about £13 million in debt. Now if you're £13 million in debt in the Premier League, it is almost like a pool's win. But it was a considerable amount, and we had over 50 players accumulated by a number of managers who were never at the club for long enough to get anyone out." End quote. So you can see where Manchester City stood at the beginning of the 1998-99 season. With poor performances on field, a bloated roster and financial troubles off field, the math did not favor the club, and it spelled disaster if the club slipped down any further. Despite their situation at the time, Manchester City were expected to stroll through the division. The fans expected the club to get their act together and achieve promotion in no time. The club began the season in good form, losing only one of the first 7 games, and at one point stood at the top of the table when they beat Macclesfield Town away. However, the old issues started rearing their heads as City went on a poor run of form. Joe Royle's side was in the doldrums. Teams that they were supposed to easily swat away, they were finding it difficult to not only beat, but were losing to. Defeat at Lincoln, defeat at Wycombe. It couldn't get much worse, right? But it was about to. On 19th December 1998, City travelled to Bootham Crescent, the former home of York City Football Club, and with them travelled some 2,000 City fans. To understand the difference in the historical standing of the two clubs, you need to know that York City has never gone beyond the second tier of the English football pyramid. In fact, the Minstermen have spent the majority of their time in the third and fourth tier of the Football League, and as of now play in the National League, the fifth tier of the English football pyramid. So, despite the loss of form, nobody was expecting Manchester City to lose this one. What happened next left the Manchester City fans red-faced. Gordon Connolly helped York to an early lead. Craig Russell equalised for City in the first half itself. But in the dying embers of the game, Andy Dawson's goal sealed the deal for the Minstermen, leaving the Blues 12th in Division 2. They had never been lower in their 118-year history, and they've never been lower since. It was the darkest day on the pitch in City's history. As City's players left the pitch, the travelling fans made their feelings known. There was a lot of anger and frustration among the fans, and it was directed towards all of them: the manager, the players, the chairman, everyone. There were increasing calls for the dismissal of Joe Royle from the fans. However, the club hierarchy resisted the calls and persisted with him. Maybe they realized that chopping and changing managers was not the way to go, and it hadn't gotten them anywhere. Royle had a big job ahead of him. Manchester City were closer to the bottom of the table than the top. Something needed to change, and change it did. After that defeat to York City, Manchester City lost only 2 more games through the remainder of the season, including a resounding 3-0 win over the league leaders and eventual champions Fulham, a crushing 6-0 drubbing away at Burnley, and avenging the loss earlier in the season against Lincoln City by beating them 4-0 at home. However, Fulham's and Walsall's great form through the season and Manchester City's indifferent form earlier meant automatic promotion was out of the question. Manchester City did end the season proper by beating the team that handed them their lowest position in the English football pyramid ever. Yes, Manchester City beat York City at home 4-0 in the final game of the regular season, condemning them to relegation while ensuring a playoff spot for themselves. Manchester City finished third, 5 points off an automatic promotion spot. The job was only half done because it was time for the playoffs. At the beginning of the season, Manchester City was earmarked for automatic promotion, but as City fans would attest, City rarely ever did things the easy way. Manchester City went up against the other Greater Manchester club, Wigan Athletic, in the playoff semi-final. The first leg was played at Springfield Park, and within 20 seconds, a misunderstanding between Manchester City goalkeeper Nicky Weaver and his teammate Gerard Weekins allowed Stuart Barlow to score from 15 yards. Paul Dickow equalised in the second half, ending the first leg 1-1. So it was all to play for at Main Road. Manchester City dominated the early part of the game and took the lead through Sean Gota in the 27th minute when he put the ball in the goal from a Michael Brown cross. Late in the game, Wigan's Green Jones stuck the crossbar, but that was about it. City had beaten Wigan Athletic 1-0 in the second league, 2-1 on aggregate, and were headed to Wembley. The other team to make it to Wembley was Gillingham. This was the first season where Manchester City and Gillingham faced each other competitively. The first match in the league between them ending in a goalless draw at Main Road, while Manchester City won the return league fixture at Priestfield 2-0. This was Gillingham's first ever appearance at Wembley, while for Manchester City, this was their 11th appearance at the National Stadium of England, though this particular appearance happened after 14 years. The playoff final drew an attendance of 76,935, the largest crowd Gillingham had ever played before in their history till then. It was also a new record attendance for the third-tier playoff final and a larger attendance than that for the first division playoff final the following day. The first half saw action from the beginning, a Dickow overhead kick striking the hand of Gillingham's Ashley in the penalty area, but the ref didn't award any penalty. Gota's shot hit the crossbar soon after, while Gillingham's Mick Galloway had his close-range shot saved by Weaver. The first half ended goalless, and while both teams got more chances after, the game remained a cagey affair with both teams unable to break the other. The 70th minute saw Weaver save a powerful Paul Smith shot, and 5 minutes later, Cook was again involved for City as he set up Gota, whose shot went past Bertram but hit the goalpost. The tie seemed to be destined for extra time, but in the 81st minute, Gillingham came alive when Asaba played a 1-2 with Smith before shooting past Weaver from around 15 yards. 5 minutes later, Taylor doubled the lead for Gillingham. It seemed Manchester City's fate had been sealed. Not only did it signal another season for the Blues in the old second division, but also an uncertain future for a once great but at the time financially struggling club. It seemed City were condemned to a tortuous summer, a bloated squad, and an uncertain future. With just a few minutes left, a few City fans had resigned to their fate and headed for the exit. Those two strikes left City with no option but to attack, and the pressure caused the first cracks in the Gillingham defense in the 89th minute, with Hollock driving a left-footed shot through a crowd of players after Darren Carr denied a goal-scoring opportunity to Gota. The deficit was cut in half, and the match was still alive. The clock ticked down to the very last moments of the match while everyone waited with bated breath. In the 5th minute of injury time, Sean Gota used his physical presence to play Dickov through, and the diminutive striker curled a rising shot past former gunner Vince Bertram. 2-2. It was not over yet. Dickov had forced the extra time. The 30 minutes of extra time did not yield a lot of opportunities, though it saw Bertram save a Dickov header and no penalty awarded for a Jeff Whitley handball. The extra time ended with no goals, and now it was all down to the penalties. Hollock, who had scored the 89th minute goal, scored the first penalty for City. But Smith's penalty was saved by Weaver. Dickov, the hero in the injury time, failed to convert his penalty, hitting the inside of both posts as the ball refused to go in. However, Gillingham failed to take advantage as Pennock missed the target altogether. Cook scored his penalty, making it 2-0, but so did Hodge, and the penalty shootout score stood 2-1. Edgehill then stepped up and converted his penalty as the ball went in off the underside of the bar. 3-1. It was now all down to this one. For Gillingham to stay in this, Butters had to convert this one. So he stepped up and shot to the left of the goalkeeper, and Weaver saved. Weaver had done it. Manchester City had done it. City won the penalty shootout 3-1. The save sent 35,000 strong Manchester City contingent into ecstasy. Nicky Weaver turned Wembley sky blue, sending Manchester City back into the first division. Post-match, the then 20-year-old goalkeeper dedicated the victory to City's long-suffering fans, who had become sick of bitter rivals United's treble triumph. Weaver said, quote, "So much has been made about United winning the treble that we had to give our fans something to celebrate. They're phenomenal. They never gave up and made so much noise in the shootout that it gave us a huge advantage. It's such a great feeling for me. It's incredible when you remember that I was third choice keeper a year ago. It's unbelievable. Winning at Wembley is very different from reserve team football, but I just try to treat it as another game." End quote. City boss Joe Royal joked about Weaver, quote, "I don't think he's ever saved a penalty before." End quote. Overall, however, Royal refused to get carried away despite winning promotion to the first division. He said, quote, "It's a step back to where we should be. A club of this size should not be too euphoric about getting promotion from the old third division, but we have taken a big step to curing Man City-itis. We did not lose a big game this time. I can honestly say we never gave up, and nor did the fans. Even when we went 2-0 down, there was a small pocket of City fans sitting behind me, and they just started singing again. They really deserve this. But I still hate playoffs. They are a lottery and a joke. We played 46 games and finished third, and that should have been enough to take us up without the 3 extra cup finals." End quote. Manchester City had done it. They did not do the unthinkable, but they showed it in the most unthinkable fashion. A special word for Manchester City fans too, who despite the despair of what had become of a once great club, never left their side. They laughed, they cried, they made self-deprecating jokes, but they always stuck by their team. The average home attendance for Manchester City stood at 28,261 this season, showing that the fans stuck by their side through thick and thin. And for those long-suffering fans, this promotion came off as a relief. Did it mean all their problems were solved? Of course not. But they were on the right track. they had escaped what not only could have been an eternity in the lower rungs of the football pyramid, but also a possible extinction of the club. Is it the biggest achievement in the club's history? To certain fans, it really is. And they'll tell you the tale of the season with utmost glee. Thank you for watching. Like if you liked it, share if you find it worthy, and subscribe for more content like this. This is Salty Football.